So would you agree with people like David Icke and many others who have talked about the reptilian race, an alien race from the Draco system, or maybe other systems who came here to Earth and can maybe even shapeshift and be behind these political figures that we see who are possessed by archons, who are interdimensional, huh?
Excuse me for being an arrogant smartass, but based on my training, I don't buy that. That's make-believe embellishment. It doesn't really lead anywhere. It's like fantasy material. You know, the Gnostic myth of Sophia makes it clear that the archons do not come from Draco or from any other star. They are unique within our solar system.
Only in our solar system.
Only in our solar system, yes.
So what about alien races then? Reptilian or whatever?
What about alien races? You know, the worst alien race is the race that is producing the Soviet technocratic nightmare. And if you can't see who that race is, you got no business talking about alien races elsewhere in the universe.
But could those be reptilian, possessed by archons?
Okay, the specific intel of the narrative of Sophia says that the archons emerged in two forms. One form is like a drone, which is described as a prematurely born fetus. So that is the gray alien archon, the big head, spindly limbs. That's what a prematurely born fetus looks like, doesn't it? It has a big head and spindly limbs. They said, though, that aspect of the archon species is the drone aspect, and that there is also an overlord aspect in their mindset. They have a hive mentality, but they also have an overlord function in that mentality. And they describe the overlord function as dracon or draconic. So there is in the Gnostic intel, and nowhere else to my knowledge, an explicit description of a reptilian type and a gray alien type.
So that goes very much hand in hand with what David Icke and other people have said. And also, you've mentioned this, and this is also in the Gnostic writings, right? Found in Nag Hammadi, where it is explained that this Archon Empire, they also have a king called the Demiurge.
Well, the Demiurge is the name for the Lord Archon, or the head of the hive mind. The hive mind has like a central nervous system, and that is the Demiurge.
So is that like the AI superbrain computer that we talk about in other terms?
Yeah, what you have in the AI superbrain computer is a machine that has been created by demented people with grandiose ideas of themselves. And they actually believe in their delusion that they are going to run the world on this AI machine. And that's not going to happen. But we can only be sure it doesn't happen when the time comes to take it down, to take down the archonic system of authorities on this planet. And that time is now. It's now or never.
So would you say that the Demiurge is real? Can this king of the archons manifest in physical form? Some people also talk about it being reptilian, in that it looks like a reptilian, or the devil, how the devil is well depicted. Or can it possess a public figure, for example? Or, I mean, how is it done? How does it work?
To answer that question, so important, that question, in the most concise way, I would say this. The Archon overlord, the Demiurge, whom the Gnostic called Yaldabaoth, is described as reptilian, right? Dracon. But it's really only a figure of speech. It's actually an allusion to something, an allusion to something else. So if you take it literally and you think, well, if they achieve their goal and there is an Archon Messiah who is the judge of the world and the controller of everything, is it going to appear like a reptilian entity, right? This is something that many people wonder about. No, it doesn't have to. You see, that's misleading to let your imagination picture it appearing in that way is misdirection. It's a misdirection of the archontic delusion. It doesn't have to appear as a reptilian.
How about in human form then?
They have already embodied themselves in human form. And this is the key to the reptilian trope. A Gnostic would say to you that if you look at the human body and you look at the skeletal structure of the nervous system and the brain, you have, of course, a kind of reptilian form inside the body. You have your spine with the tail of your spine, which is the tail of the serpent, and you have the serpent in the body coming up to the back brain. And we were talking about Kundalini at the beginning, right? The serpent power. So there is a serpent reptilian form already in the body.
But some people say that we are a hybrid cloned slave race, a mixture of mammalian and reptilian because of the reptilian brain. Some people talking about a peace treaty between Lemuria and Atlantis in ancient civilizations also. And then they created this cloned slave race called Homo sapiens, or human beings.
That is an unfortunate piece of disinformation. It is an extremely damaging and I would say disturbing narrative that was intentionally introduced to the world some years ago through Zechariah Sitchin and who was, by the way, an agent of the archonic powers. Look at his ethnicity.
Some people say that he took part in rituals. I know that David Icke interviewed a lady called Arizona Wilder who claimed to have been a mind-controlled victim and said that she had seen Sitchin at these Illuminati rituals. I don't know if there's any truth to this, but you also claim that he was not quite what he said he was, or what?
No, he was not the scholar that he said he was. He was an asset for the archonic authorities to plant this slave species narrative. And I completely reject the slave species narrative. I've talked about this a great deal, and I give the reasons why. We are not a slave species, but if you teach people that they are, what are the consequences going to be? People become what they believe. So getting back to the serpent in the body, I said that the reptilian form of the ultimate archontic ruler is not necessarily a reptilian in the literal sense. They have already become reptilian in their neurological and spinal structure. You see, the archons did not achieve an alien-human hybrid. According to my information, I could be wrong. I'm not the Pope. I'm not infallible, but I stand strongly on this view.
Neither is he, dare I say.
Right. Mm-hmm. But you see, they did achieve a neural hack. This is what you need to understand. What is a neural hack as distinguished from a genetic hybrid? So the Gnostic materials say this, and I cite it in Not in His Image. They said, the Gnostics attempted to rape Eve, which means that they attempted to interbreed with humanity, but they failed. But they succeeded at doing something else, which is that they hacked into the neurological circuits of a particular group of people at a particular time.
And who are they?
They were the so-called Hebrews of the Old Testament. And this story is described in their book, the Bible. This encounter, the encounter of Abraham with Melchizedek, is the event that describes how the archons intruded into our world, they use something called HAL, H-A-L, which is a virtual reality. And this is a power that they have. So, for instance, we know today that there are virtual reality games, right? You put on a headset and you go into a room, you're given a pair of skis or a tennis racket, and you play tennis in the virtual. And some people might think that's just as good as playing it in real life, right? So the Archons can create that kind of virtual reality illusion. And they did this. They projected into the human atmosphere of the planet, into the atmosphere, a certain entity called Melchizedek, which was a perfect replicant of a human being, but it wasn't human. It was a simulacrum, a replicant. And through that being, they communicated to Abraham. And that was the first step of achieving this neural hack. So at that moment, in a way that I've described elsewhere, too technical to explain now, they actually introduced into the brain, through the ears and the mucous membranes, a type of nanobot, parasites. It's remarkable that certain people today, you're getting the joke here, right? It's remarkable that certain people today, conscientious seekers, are saying, they're warning us that someone is trying to prick us and to introduce into our bodies a kind of serum that contains actually nanobite particles that are going to take over our genetics and our mind. Have you heard that story? That was already done 3,800 years ago. But it was only done to a particular group, which I call the tribal vector. So when the Archons had to achieve that intrusion into the neurological and genetics, that is what they did, but it's not an interbreeding. There is no alien-human hybrid.
But you just talked about replicants. That sounds very much like like shapeshifters, or could be.
Well, they say, the Gnostics say, that the Archons are shape shifters. But, what are you to make of that? Well,
they can take another form.
Look at, what kind of shape shifting are you talking about? Now, if you're a shaman in the tradition of Castaneda or South America, you can shapeshift into a puma or into a condor or into another animal. That's the traditional idea of shapeshifting, which is a beautiful, magical thing that belongs to Sophia's world. But their kind of shapeshifting is nothing else but disguises and fraudulent masks. Philanthropy, humanitarians, that's shapeshifting. The Archons are behind the mask of humanitarianism. They're behind the mask of the WHO and all these institutions and organizations which tell you that they are doing the best for humanity. That's the shapeshifting you want to watch out for.
Definitely, but you would say that nothing can change form physically. I mean, we all DNA and we're made of atoms, and atoms have no solidity. So holographically in structure, if we can call it that, then it could possibly change form. A sophisticated hologram, that is, of course.
Well, in the first place, we are not hologrammic. Organic life is not hologrammic. Something that you hear often, which I object to strongly, obviously I object to a lot of things, is we're living in a simulation. That is a complete delusion in itself to even say that.
So you don't feel that we are living in a simulation?
Absolutely not. No.
So would you not agree that we are 3D material beings, three-dimensional, meaning manifestations of consciousness in human physical form inside a dream reality. We talked about this being a dream reality earlier on in the show. Is this reality an absolute dream state manifestation, like a computer game existence, that we perceive as being real, which we experience through our five senses in order to create the illusion of realness, a dream within the matrix? What are your thoughts?
It is not a computer game simulation. It is a living dream. It's alive. It's a living dream. Her world in which we exist is a living dream. It's material. Everything is material. And everything that your senses detect is real and true. It's not a simulation.
But still, atoms have no solidity. So if you go really, really close to an atom, it dissolves. It doesn't exist. And only when you go away from it, you will see the bigger picture. And then it can manifest in physical form. That's basically science, isn't it?
No, it's junk science. It's a bunch of abstract ideas. The atom is just a model of something. There are several intelligent examples of people who completely debunk the theory of the atom. Do you know what the definition of life is in Sophia's mind? How does she define life? Not how science defines life, atomic structure and all this. How does she, who is the source of life, define life? It is the electrified animation of colloids. Colloids. That's what it's all about, not atomic structure, colloids. Colloids are like clusters of living molecular units. Like everything in your body your cells are an expression of colloids. The mist in the sky is an expression of colloids. The stream of water running in river is an expression. Colloids are living molecular structures that have no atomic structure within them. What sustains them is not atomic structure. What sustains them is the imagination of the goddess.
But we are manifesting or vibrating on a three-dimensional plane, so that we are in a 3D reality. How would you describe then 4D or the fifth dimension and further up maybe? Where are the archons? Where are the souls or ghosts or maybe other interdimensional beings? Is that in the fourth dimension or the fifth dimension in another realm that is not in this 3D reality?
I think I better go out and check for the next bus to Copenhagen.
You're welcome. I'd love to welcome you here.
Listen, we could talk for 16 hours about that. I've written about the 9 dimensions or 10 dimensions of the universe. The 10th dimension is eternity, which is now. This is eternity. And then the 9 dimensions are the structures in which eternity has to break down so that we can experience all of its facets. You see? So we live in the 4th dimension now, and there is a 5th, 6th, and the 7th, and I've written a lot about that, and it really gets into things that would be difficult for us to cover adequately here.
But like Nikola Tesla says, if you want to know the key to the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So everything is vibrating on a frequency, right? It is the same.
But that's just language. That's just jargon. Vibration, frequency. What do you actually feel as a living entity? Don't you feel like right now, for instance? How moist is your body?
Well, pretty hot is pretty hot in the studio here.
Normally, I've asked that to a woman before because, it makes sense. But I'm asking you, how wet are you? How wet are you getting? Well, you your brain is like a Kleenex. Do you know that? Your brain right now, as you're talking to me, is like a wet mass of Kleenex filled with electrical circuits. This is life. Everything is material. It's all water, electricity. There's this language about frequencies and everything becomes to me abstract, and it distracts from the actual material reality and the sensory reality. Everything you sense is real. There's no illusion in Sophia's dreaming. It's a living dream.
But if you even say, oh, vibration, frequencies, and all of that, and you talk about everything being real, then how would you argue that what you're saying, what you know of the gnosis and the stories and the texts found in Nagamadi, how is that real? How do we know that? And you, of course, talk a lot about Sophia. And how do you really explain the concept of Sophia? You talk about it being a feminine energy. Am I correct in understanding that Sophia is a kind of representation of the human soul, but also the feminine aspect of God?
No.
In whatever way God can be explained.
No.
Yeah.
Sophia is the earth.
Gaia.
Her body is the earth. The air you breathe in the biosphere is part of her body. You're breathing her body. You're a cell in the body of the earth. She's not some representation of something otherworldly. She is our world. She is your life. She is your mother. You know that you have a physical mother, right? A biological mother. I don't know if she's still alive or not.
Yes, she is.
So you can go right now, you could leave here today and go and have dinner with your mother. Well, Sophia is just as real as your biological mother.
So what you're talking about is planet Earth, right? Gaia.
Yes.
And this is how you described as being, we say Mother Earth. So this is how you explain Sophia. But you just put a name to it and make it more human-like in a way.
It's not human-like. Do you think the planet looks like a human being?
It's in order for the viewers to really understand what your and how you're talking, how they can even understand what these words mean.
Well, it takes time. Gnosis is a discipline. If you want to really mean to learn, as the Bee Gees said, do you really want to know, or do you really mean to learn? Do you know about that lyrics of the Bee Gees song? It was a Mandela effect. So if you really mean to learn, then it's like anything else. You've got to put commitment and determination into it to become familiar and comfortable with the things that I'm saying, speaking as a Gnostic. It just doesn't happen like that. It's like if you want to become a botanist, a nurse, a leather worker, you have to learn the art of Gnosis in the same way. But one thing that I can make absolutely clear to you from the beginning is that you don't have to know anything except that you're alive to know and love the goddess Sophia. When you know things such as I discuss, arcane, esoteric subjects, questions about, that's just human culture. I have an intellectual culture. So my intellectual culture is real to me. You can test it and prove it. That's why I have confidence in it. But you don't need intellectual culture to recognize the source of life.
But you've actually written in your book yourself, and I quote, Sophia fell into her own dreaming. And you also say, Sophia falls, not humanity. The Gnostics did not say that human beings have fallen into this world from a more perfect condition. So if human beings are not, let's say, an alien cloned hybrid slave race that acquired a soul by accident, perhaps, which was not part of the experiment, some researchers say. Would you say that we humans are a real evolutionary miracle?
What do you prefer to be? If you had the choice, what would you prefer to be?
Well,
a magnificent expression of a living dream, of a sublime, feminine, divine power that is present around you all the time, that reaches you through her frequencies, that you can reach and meet? Or do you want to be a slave species of an alien human hybrid? Take your pick.
well, definitely not. But what a lot of the people who even talk about this, human beings being a cloned slave race, they also said that something unexpected happened, which they did not know would happen back then, and that was that human beings acquired a soul, and that a soul entered the body, and we got something called empathy, and that from that we became more organic, and that it is basically consciousness in a soul that takes, and we take form in a physical body until the soul leaves the body.
Hey, show me the evidence. Do you have empathy? You, Lucas.
Of course.
Have you ever met anyone who doesn't?
Yes, I think we all have.
Those are the psychopaths and the archonified human beings. But the fact that they don't have empathy, and they show it by their cruel and insane behavior, wouldn't you agree? The fact that they don't have empathy is due to it being, due to losing it because of their delusion in the archonic mindset. We had empathy from the beginning, and some of us have never lost it, you see? We didn't acquire it later on. Empathy is essential. Empathy and self-love are the root of human consciousness. See?
But when they talked about souls entering or becoming part of the human race, this is of course eons, or I mean, I don't know how long ago. And it's not what I say, but this is an important part of the discussion. What is the soul? What is the soul being when we die? What happens to us when we die? Where do we go? Do we go into a karma wheel reincarnation soul trap created by the archons?
There has been so much crap and bullshit created by the human mind out of a basic ignorance of the fundamentals of life. I promise you that if you are in touch with the fundamentals of life in your senses, in your recognition of the presence of the mother source, then you can know things that are worth knowing, you see? And not become distracted and misled by all of these, I call it fantasy material.
But what if that is a knowing? An absolute knowing? A lot of near-death experiencers, so many, thousands even, who doesn't even know each other or believe in the same belief system or whatever, they talk about these experiences. And what about
A close friend of mine had a near-death experience. What I like about the near-death experiences and the testimonies is there is evidence. What Sophia wants us to say in the process of trying to know things is, show me the evidence. Show me the evidence.
But if it's metaphysical, how can you show anybody any evidence? If you had a near-death experience, how can you show anybody any evidence? Except if you were out of body or declared dead, and then you could hear what was happening on the operating table. And people talk about them going out of body, seeing a lot of things, and coming back and explaining it. That is, of course, what I would definitely call evidence.
That is damn good evidence. It is anecdotal evidence, but it is damn good. But if you're going to speculate about metaphysical events and dimensions for which there is no evidence, then you're completely wasting your time. I would say if there is no evidence for the metaphysical, maybe there is no metaphysical.
So what evidence do we have that the archons exist?
We have the evidence in the influence that they are directly exerting upon us. That's the evidence in the force they exert upon us through psychological warfare, through lies, deception, mind control. That's the evidence of the presence of the archons working through their human proxies.
But a lot of people would probably just say that these are just an evil ruling elite, a deep state, maybe, that has orchestrated the New World Order agenda. And a lot of them are psychopaths, a lot of them want to climb to the top, and some of them are in the royal bloodlines, and they're just human beings being maybe psychopaths. No empathy.
They are human beings demented by the archontic mindset.
But there's still no evidence of the archons, are there? There are of the ruling elite and of, them being not very empathetic.
Their presence and their behavior is the evidence of the archons. Can't you see that?
But you were just talking about that. What evidence do we have of the metaphysical and what is happening when we die, and other realms as well, and an alien species maybe? I mean, that a lot of people also in this field come out and talk about.
But they're not metaphysical. There's nothing metaphysical about the archons. By the way, there is no metaphysics in Gnosis. So I welcome you to investigate it. And one thing that you may find happily as a great relief is that there's no metaphysics. Metaphysics is completely useless.
So what we're really talking about, them being interdimensional, huh?
It's a word. Where do you go with it? What's the takeaway? What's the point of being interdimensional?
If you, as an interdimensional being, an archon, can possess a human being and orchestrate something that we are part of right now, which is this terrible situation that the whole world is in, and this globalization plan, and the UN Agenda 21, 2030, New World Order that they have talked about for so long. This is basically what we're all part of right now, whether or not it is an archontic hijack or if it's just a ruling elite that wants to control the masses.
The Gnostic would say that it cannot be reduced to simply control freaks and human beings who have grandiose designs to control and enslave others. The degree and magnitude of this evil, human evil, is such that there is a non-human factor in it. So if we were just left to ourselves without the archonic influence on this planet, we would never have come to a moment as dangerous as this, because human beings in their own nature cannot do that to each other. There has to be a paranormal element working in them to bring them to that behavior. This is a really strong point that I made in Audin's image.
So you would say that psychopaths and sociopaths does not exist in the way that psychology explains it. They are possessed by archons, or are archons in human form.
No, I would say that psychopathy and sociopathic behavior is something that could occur in the course of human development over the centuries if certain people lost their empathy, their natural empathy. Now, it begs the question, well, why would certain people in a country or time suddenly lose their empathy and then become psychopathic? But that's not the point of the Gnostic message. The point of the Gnostic message is the exaggeration and intensification of this lack of empathy is evidence of something that is non-human.
But somebody could be born in a family, say two brothers, and one is turns out to be a psychopath, and they can even sense that at a very, very early age. Maybe they were even born with it, I don't know. And then the other one is, let's say, normal and have empathy, and they have the same upbringing and the same parents. How do we explain that?
Exactly. No one no one to my knowledge has explained that, and I can't explain that. So if we talk about something that might be called a natural occurrence of empathy in the human races, that's something very interesting to study. But this lack of empathy, this sadistic, monstrous deception is beyond human. You cannot understand it unless you factor in the paranormal alien element. That is one of the most important things I explain in Not in His Image.
Absolutely. And how could they, if there is this archontic force, an alien force, orchestrating the whole New World Order agenda and everything we are exposed to and enslaved by at the moment, why would they not operate outside of this three-dimensional frequency here and hijack the souls, our souls, human beings' souls, at the point of death, maybe going into this white light frequency that religious people talk about being heaven, and then maybe you see whatever you believe, God or Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha, and you see a life review and then reincarnation, going back to this earthly realm, maybe a prison planet, obviously, within the matrix, in a new body with a wiped memory. Would that not be the ultimate trap when we leave the body at the point of death? What are your thoughts on that?
I see what you're getting at. I know that this has been elaborated in that way, that the prison planet matrix and the chain of reincarnation is caused by our archontic capture. Okay, it's a very, very big subject. I would just say that in the Nag Hammadi, there's a passage that says, whoever does not know what happens after death while they are still alive will not experience anything when they die. So whatever happens after death, you can speculate about it, you can talk about the chain of reincarnation and all that, but whatever happens, if you really want to know, well, you can know before you die what happens after death.
How will you get that knowing?
You get that knowing through the practice that the Gnostics themselves followed in the mystery cells. You go into the presence of the Aeon Sophia. You surrender totally to the power and beauty of her presence. And then you are both alive and dead at the same time. You know what it feels like when you won't be here anymore. And yet you're still here. And this is an experience that cannot be constructed. It cannot be intellectually attained. You have to have that experience raw and firsthand, and then you know.
And can you practice that through meditation or lucid dreaming if you really focus on being able to go into lucid dreaming more and navigate in that? And at the point of death, can you choose then consciously wherever you want to go, if you want to go to Source, God, Creator, or other planetary realms, or what can you choose? Can you just choose at will?
It's beyond will. The act of surrender that the Gnostics described in certain passages, the act of surrender before the organic light, which is the naked body of the Aeon Sophia, is such that you lose all distinctions and you lose your identity, yet you know more fully than ever what it is to be alive, because you are alive in the wholeness of her presence. You see, these are mystical experiences that can only be had firsthand. I'm even somewhat reticent, to talk about them in this way. But the method, I can't speak for lucid dreaming, Lucas, because I'm not qualified to talk about it. Maybe people have achieved things. I have not achieved much in the deliberate practice of lucid dreaming that you're talking about, right? No, I only use the Gnostic method, which is to rely on the assistance of psychoactive plants to take you to the presence of the organic light. That is the Gnostic practice and the only one.
So are you talking about shamanism here, saying that as a shaman yourself, I think, would you say that you can obtain or acquire knowledge that is greater than anything else by doing a ritual where experimental drugs or what they call plant medicine as well is not involved, or does it have to be involved? I mean, taking mind-expanding, mind-altering substance or plants to acquire this knowledge.
The standards of shamanic practice in Gnosticism are rigorous and clear, and they're simple. And I put a lot of effort into setting them out. You don't use drugs. You don't use synthetic substances of any kind. Primarily use psilocybin mushrooms.
But couldn't those be very dangerous for a lot of people, also who are maybe not into it or unbalanced in their psyche or a little bit scared of it? I mean, some people have not really returned from such a magic mushroom trip. Like some people have not really become themselves again after having had some ayahuasca experiences, huh?
It's a technique. It's a particular technique. And if you don't follow the technique, then the experiences you have could be anything. They could be hilarious. You could have party time. They could be devastating. They could traumatize you for the rest of your life. If you follow the Gnostic technique, which is called the Teleste method, then you go straight to beauty. You go straight to source. And yes, you can know things that are of a divine and transcendent nature. That is what gnosis is. But you do not only know them with the use of psychoactive plants, you also know them in ordinary consciousness as well. You have it both ways.
So would you advocate, people taking this plant medicine when they do shamanistic rituals, or not even that?
No, I would not advocate anyone consuming psilocybin mushrooms unless they do it in the rigorous technique of this practice. I am completely against the recreational, reckless, and aimless ingestion of any substances, be they natural or synthetic. I'm completely against that.
So please also explain to the viewers, what is Teleste? What is a Teleste? Teleste, I think it is pronounced. This also goes into ancient mysteries, right?
I've sort of I discovered the word Teleste in the Greek Gnostic material. I'm very happy to say that I've been able to restore it and bring it into current parlance. But people use it today, and they know what they're talking about. So it comes from the Greek root telos or telos, meaning aim, purpose, objective. So the telestes, that's the singular name, is someone who is aimed. They have a purpose. They have a goal. And the teleste is the plural of that name. So the Gnostics called themselves Teleste, meaning we who are aimed. They did not call themselves Gnostics, which was an insult of their enemies, and it means a smartass or a know-it-all, like me. See? So it's important to know what they called themselves and not what they were called, sort of like with the Nazis. It's important to know what they call themselves and not what they were called.
You've said and explained that, in your opinion, Satanism is not real Satanism in the way that has been corrupted by the Bible and perhaps used for control purposes by the church. You have talked about something you called Salon Satanists, I guess horror mixed with gross and opulent decadence used by the Illuminati in rituals and in symbolism. And you talk about Lucifer, the satanic hero. But if Satanism is not what we are led to believe, then what is Luciferianism and Saturnian Satanism?
Well, suppose you and I are a couple of detectives, and a boss comes to us one day and he says, okay, Lucas and John, I got to put you guys on a crime case. This is a very difficult case. You have to go solve what Satanism is. And we say, okay, we're up for it. We like a challenge. But, the head of the department, the head detective says, well, I'm sure you two can do this because you're pretty smart guys and you have a passion for the truth. But I have to tell you that you have to go and start over there in that room. And over there in that room are files and cases and documents and testimony that have been accumulated for hundreds of years about Satanism. So we go over and we go in the room and we look around and we think, what? We have to go through all of this, all of these different definitions of Luciferian, Satan, different practices in order to solve the problem of what Satanism is. This is going to be impossible. It's what I call the problem of corrupt files. There are so many corrupt files about Satanism that it's almost impossible to sort it out in any kind of way with a clear takeaway. Okay? Now, I didn't write some of those things you just quoted. I don't know where they came from. I'm very careful to talk about satanic rites.
This was just part of my question, basically, but I know that you have said that Satanism, in the way that has been explained or that we think it is not really true. And you talk about the satanic hero. You've also mentioned Lord Byron and his decadent lifestyle.
Yeah, I did a whole series on YouTube called The True Lucifer is Sophia. And I talked about the Romantic movement and how Satan, the mythological Satan, was like the archetype of the rebel. This is just one of the tropes of Satanism. There are so many tropes. There's the parasites who eat children for adrenochrome. And then there is Lord Byron and the Romantic poets who are these stylish, brilliant intellectuals who are satanic in the sense that they are against all authority. It's a huge...
But why is that satanic?
It's satanic because the word simply means adversarial, a rebel, to be a rebel.
Really? It does?
Yeah, that's all it means. It's all it meant to Byron and the people of his time. That's all it means. The other heavy-duty associations attached to it belong to all those files in that room, you see. But basically, I want to go back to a point that I made. If you want to know the root of Satanism as it operates in the world today, go back to 1666 and the Sabbatean Frankish heresy. That is the concrete, volatile expression of Satanism, and the evidence of it is everywhere you look. So I would say, go to the most immediate problem of Satanism. That's it.
And that's where you will find the reason for, let's say, the Illuminati and those deep state factions doing these satanic rituals and the symbolism that we find all over, basically.
Yeah, if they are doing them, I myself have not seen what I consider to be 100% convincing evidence, 100%. But if they are doing them, what are they doing? Are they doing them because they are worshiping a bat-like, goat-footed figure who lives in another dimension? No, you don't need a bat-like, goat-footed figure in another dimension to be sick and demented and psychopathic. It's within human capacity under the archontic influence. They're just playing games. They're ugly, cruel games, but to my mind, they're just games.
Yeah, but they're doing them. And they're doing them to children.
Yes, they are. I totally agree. I think the evidence for that is convincing.
You've even claimed that the ritual during Christmas, well, Christ Mass, you say that the little child Jesus that people worship, Christmas, Christ being born, that's actually a tribute to child sacrifice.
That is true. I did say that. Christianity is based on child sacrifice, and so is Judaism. And that's in the evidence. It's obvious because that child in the manger, you're supposed to imagine it as being the perfect human, right? Perfect innocence. But what happens to that child? It gets tortured. It gets pricked by nails. So why is the divine, beautiful child sacrificed? It's simply another version of child sacrifice. The archetype of Christianity is child sacrifice. And it's so wrong. It's so wrong for us.
But why do you think those elitists are doing these horrific rituals then?
Because they're insane, man.
Yeah, but there must be a purpose for it, for control, to obtain a certain kind of energy, to manifest those entities you talk about, the archons, whether they manifest as a reptilian, where depicted like the devil, or what? Why do they do this? For power?
They do it because it's a thrill. And it thrills them and excites them. But it doesn't give them any supernatural power. On the contrary, it is the most decadent and perverse behavior that is imaginable. It's a cesspool of depravity, but they love it. They love their cesspool.
Yeah, but absolutely, totally right. But I mean, there must be a reason. A lot of people I've spoken to talk about what is happening in those rituals. Some even talk about them having seen manifestations of deities.
Well, sure. Go back to Aleister Crowley's rituals. Go back to Luther. Luther, who formed the Protestant movement, claims that when he was sitting in his room, the devil appeared to him in physical form, and he threw an inkwell at it. The human imagination, under fear and intensity, can produce actual palpable hallucinations. But I reject the idea that they do these practices in order to acquire power. They don't. They're destroying themselves, and they want to take as many others down with them as they can, because destruction is a thrill. It's a thrill to them. It's their pleasure. But I don't give it any higher purpose. I don't buy that. I think it's speculation and fantasy material. Don't give them that power. Why give them so much supernatural power? They're just perverted control freaks, and they need to be taken out. Period.
Well, a lot of people will probably argue with that on that topic there, because a lot of people who have been, let's say, ex-mind controlled Illuminati slaves and others have talked about what they do and how this is part of a network where they experience all kinds of supernatural things. So what is to know about this, really? What do you feel it's a knowing for you that they don't do it for supernatural purposes?
I base what I know on evidence, and I haven't seen that evidence. I've heard anecdotal evidence. You know what anecdotal evidence is in court. It's very weak. I don't dismiss it, but I've heard anecdotal evidence, and I've heard interpretations about what these rituals are intended to do.
Well, you're not going to see the evidence. You're not going to see that on television. You'll only see it in films, right? As a fictional story, predictive programming, basically, putting it out there in the open. But you're not going to see it in real life, because that would expose the whole thing. We don't have evidence for a lot of things, and that's why they have coined the term conspiracy theorists because they can just dismiss anything that is not evidence or things that can be fact-checked or something like that, which we see a lot happening these days.
Yeah, well, as we know, that tool used by the enemies of life to oppose anyone who's trying to expose them is a very nefarious tool. We know that. But on the other hand, to say that a crime was committed, but there is no evidence of the crime is not a smart way to think.
Well, if there's a whole network of families and people who are missing children that are not being reported.
That is evidence of something really big going on. I agree. That is evidence.
Yeah.
A kind of evidence, but the whole case has not been put together because you don't prove a case in court. Proof is a body of evidence.
Yeah, but that whole court system is created by the same people, the same ruling elite.
Yeah. Okay, I'm not talking about the courtroom as such. I'm talking about property, the faculty of the human mind to prove something. You prove something by gathering evidence and building it into a case. So there is all kinds of evidence.
But there's a lot of evidence, and where will we go with it? A lot of us are trying to expose it, but where can we go with it when you cannot even go to those authorities that are supposed to take care of them?
Well, there is a particular download I got once. I do get downloads from the mother source. It's one of my pretensions, one of my claims. And I got a short and sweet message from one of her powers, known as Bhairavi or Sekhmet, who represents the mother rage, the protective rage of the Earth Mother. And that message was, freedom stands at the end of secrecy. So we could talk for 4 more days about all the things that we suppose might be done in secret. But freedom comes when that secrecy ends. And I ask you this question: how is that secrecy going to end? And how soon is it going to end? Because until that secrecy ends, they will still have an advantage, won't they? A tremendous advantage. But I do strongly believe that secrecy is coming to an end. And this growing body of evidence you mentioned is really important. And I don't discount it, believe me. I don't discount the evidence as far as it goes.
I mean, we certainly could go on for a long time, and we have just about used around 2 hours now. And I would maybe suggest that we do another interview at some point soon, because there are still a lot of things we didn't get to cover in this interview. So it would be wonderful to have you on again so that we can cover more at some point.
Oh, I most certainly would enjoy that. Could I perhaps propose something that I would like to do as in the course of our conversation? I would like to talk about my school, Nemata, and what is a modern mystery school today and how it works, and about the practices of Gnosis, because that's the solution to these things. And I like to balance out a conversation. We've talked a lot about the problem, and we've done great, going like wildfire. But balance it out by talking about the solution as well. So if we could do that, I would be most delighted.
Absolutely, I would love to do that. And we can also just, end this interview. We always do that by asking, what is your most important message for people watching this and for the world at the moment? And I get the feeling that you really think that there's hope, and this is what we all want, and hope for that things can change for the better, and hopefully as soon as possible. So before we do a part 2, hopefully soon with you, where we can go more in depth about Gnosis, Gnosticism, mystery schools, and very, very important topics that we didn't get to cover today. Please end up today with talking about your most important message for the world and people watching right now.
Sure. I don't use the word hope myself because I think hope is something that can be easily defeated or undermined. I talk about this as an opportunity and a challenge. And every single person who has some idea of what's going on needs to look into themselves and say, okay, am I up for this challenge? It's a great opportunity, but it is quite a difficult challenge. My greatest concern is that those who take on the challenge to defeat the authorities and to overthrow this Soviet technocratic nightmare reach a unity together. No one can do it alone. There has to be unity of force. And one factor in that unity that I emphasize, which, as far as I know, other so-called spiritual teachers don't, is hate. Hate. The power of hate is a unifying power. And so perhaps we could bring up that dicey subject as well.
Really? You are an advocate, an advocate for hate?
Yes, I am. Hate is a human emotion, isn't it? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, but how can that possibly be put into good use, or being something that can be applied to anything that could grow and be a good thing?
How could hate be a good thing? Well, do you feel hate for people who recklessly destroy other people's lives?
But isn't that buying into the whole game? Isn't that feeding that whole game, building the whole game?
Hate has a really bad name because it has been said that if you hate someone who is hurting you or wants to kill you or destroy you, you are in some way buying into their negative energy. I totally disagree. Totally. Hate needs to be honored and recognized as much as love. You need hate to protect what you love. You cannot protect what you love with love.
No, but how can you build on anything with hate? That is a satanic energy, huh?
That is your conception of what hate is, but you are condemning that emotion. How can you condemn a basic human emotion?
But isn't that what the archons want? Then they got to you. Then they got you, didn't they? Then they can really feed on you and work through you. This is what the New World Order elitist wants people to do. Now they also want, through the Hegelian dialectic, to divide and conquer, split people snitching on their neighbors at the moment. You know, this is hate also in full swing.
But it's not the pure power of hate in its pure sense. You know, the archons do not use hate. The archons use deception. And by deception, they get people to hate each other, as we see with the masked and the unmasked. You see? No, I'm talking about the moral power of hate. Hate is a moral factor in the human animal. Do you hate deceit? Do you hate liars?
That is an interesting question. I would say that to be strong and to be powerful and to go out there and do the work and to expose yourself to criticism and trying to change the world is a very, very powerful tool, but not very constructively done with hate, but certainly with a pure heart full of love as well. Definitely with love.
Can't there be hate in a pure heart? You see, you have a categorical definition of what hate is. It's bad, it's to be condemned, it's to be rejected. Who taught you that? Or is that something you genuinely feel?
So how would you define hate?
I would define hate as the emotion, the natural emotion that comes to a human animal when they encounter something that negatively impacts their life or interferes with their freedom. It's a natural self-protective emotion. I guess I really dropped a can of worms there. You might want to delete this from the end of the interview.
No, this is fascinating. You are certainly a controversial man, and I'm sure that that a lot of people will find this more than interesting, having watched this. And I'm very excited to do another show with you, hopefully soon, because there's a lot to cover. And you've just released, or very soon it will be re-released, republished, your book, quite famous book, Not in His Image, from 2006, but you've also included so much more. You elaborated, and you doubled up on the material. Is that how it is?
Yeah, I have doubled down on a couple of points. One is about the role of hate, and the other is about the deceit of Christ. So I've really gone to the core, and I've spared no punches. And you can pre-order the book now, and it would be good for me if you pre-ordered it. It will be available on the 18th of September. But if enough people pre-order it and it gets more than 400, it goes to a higher notch on the Amazon ratings, and that's good for me.
So how can people purchase the book or order it, and what's the best way to get in contact with you or to get the new version of Not in His Image?
Okay, you can order it through the usual channels of Amazon or through my publisher in the United States, Chelsea Green. And you can reach me by going to Nemeta, NEMETA.org. That is my mystery school online. And right on the homepage, there's a contact button.
Great. And I'm looking very much forward to have you on again for part 2. But for now, this has been eye-opening, controversial, exciting, and fascinating. And I want to thank you so much, John Lamb Lash, for being on Age of Truth TV. Thank you so much.
I hope I didn't drop a bomb on you at the end by bringing that up, because I didn't want to steer everything off course, because in our way of conversing, we can cover a lot of stuff. If we just hone a little bit more the back and forth, we can go into topics that are really difficult for people and sort them out. I'm really inspired by talking to you.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Likewise to you, Lucas. Thanks for putting up with me. And I'll catch you later.
Thank you so much to John Lamb Lash, and thanks to all of you for watching Age of Truth TV.